Okay, now it continues to get more interesting, at least for me. So let's talk about consumer surplus. So basically, a couple hundred years ago, people start thinking, hey, we feel like happiness is good and lack of happiness is bad. And we seem to realize that the amount of stuff that people have maybe affects their happiness a bit. And there's some evidence for this. I mean, income seems to have some effect on happiness. It seems to go a bit like this, right? Like, obviously, the first £20,000 that you get makes you a lot more happier than the sixth £20,000 that you get. If you went from 100 to 120k, that would not be life changing. If you go from 0 to 20k, that is life changing. But um, so it's going to have this sort of decreasing effect on your happiness, but it's still likely to make you a bit happier, make your life a bit more convenient. And if you talk about, well, how happy are people in different countries, Zimbabwe, 51% of people say that they're happy to be alive. In places like Northern Europe, it's like 90%. Now, that's only a correlation, but hey, there's a correlation in the direction of having more stuff seems to make people happier. Although, of course, there's also other things like health, corruption, etc. Anyway, so economists went, hey, and philosophers, they went, hey, happiness is good. How are we going to think about what in society leads to more happiness, though? Because we can't just have the government telling people to be happy or deciding what will make people happy and doing everything for that. That's got all sorts of complications of its own. So we need some sort of more organic, kind of self-doing way of doing that. And this one chap goes along and he goes, hang on a minute, markets are pretty good at this actually, because if people are pretty good at deciding what gives benefit to them, then their willingness to pay indicates how much benefit they get from something. So my demand curve is hopefully very similar to my marginal private benefit, where marginal private benefit is, I will write it out, the added benefit from an added unit of whatever the good or services I'm consuming. So the added benefit to me of an extra, it could be a chocolate bar, it could be a car, whatever, extra unit of product in the market, right? So that can be my MPB here. So the idea is, hey, hopefully demand kind of approximates this. Your willingness to give up stuff indicates how much benefit you get from this. Now, obviously, pardon me, obviously there's a problem when we're thinking about this, which is, well, some people have more money than other people. Does that mean that suddenly they get more pleasure out of things because they've got more ability to pay? Probably not. So there are some ways in which this is kind of silly. However, broadly speaking, it sort of makes sense as an approximation. And so we hope that people's demand curves approximate their marginal private benefit curves. How much extra benefit do they get as they consume more of the quantity of whatever product we're talking about? So now, let's say I manage to buy at this price. Let's say that this is the price level. I'm going to call it equilibrium price. How do I think about what my benefit is as a consumer, as a buyer of things? Well, when it came to the first unit of the good, the first, I don't know, bottle of wine I had. Well, that sounds bad. First glass of wine or whatever, right? So let's say you valued it all the way up there because you were willing to pay whatever obscene price the restaurant asked. You were willing to pay all the way up here for that first one. And so, but you only had to pay down here. You went to the supermarket instead, you were smart. And so what was the added benefit that you got? It's this. It's the gap between the price that you were willing to pay and the price that you paid. And this intuitively makes sense, right? If you are willing to pay £25 to go and see this movie, and you manage to find a ticket at the local cinema for only £15, you feel like a winner. You've gained £10 in virtue. You would have been willing to pay that and you didn't have to. That's surplus. That's your added extra benefit that you got above the minimum that you would have been willing to pay. That's extra benefit. And we could say, hey, okay, that's £15 worth of benefit. It's kind of dodgy because different people have different ability to pay, but let's ignore that for a minute because it doesn't help us and say £15 surplus. Or for the wine, the difference between the maximum you'd have been willing to pay for one glass and the amount that you did pay. Now, as you start having your second glass or your second movie of the month, it doesn't hit quite the same. So the benefit that you get, the willingness that you have to pay for it is probably decreasing. But as long as it still remains above the price that you can pay for it, you're still going to buy it. So then you've got this added benefit, and then you've got this added benefit for the third unit, and so on and so on. So what do we find? Hey, look, I've just shaded in this area. I've shaded in the total differences between the amount that I'd be willing to pay for the first, the second, the third, etc., and the amount that I actually paid at this price equilibrium. And this is what I would call consumer surplus, because it's the extra benefit that I've captured beyond the price that I paid. And so I can say, hey, that's the pleasure, the benefit that I get, whatever you want to call it. This is consumer surplus. This is how we think of it from a sort of welfare economics angle. And it all came from this realization that maybe happiness is cool.